Welcome back to filling cracks and chips and dints. Last week you saw us strip all the wallpaper off, gut 2 rooms all in the same 2 days, take off the skirting boards, and the curtain rails and the poles. I've had a few people query whether there was asbestos in the storage heater. I'd already checked online. Apparently the asbestos models were in the 70s and ours was the late 80s model. But thank you for those who suggested checking the serial number. That definitely confirmed there wasn't any in it. Well, I'm definitely going to be wearing a mask anyway with the removal of the rest of them because we've got about 4 more to do. So once I've filled all the chips and dints on the walls, I'm then going to be moving to the ceiling where there's a big crack all the way from one end to the other and a few dotted around over there. Now, if you remember, a plasterer had told us it looks like there wasn't enough screws or nails in there. So what I'm going to be doing is trying to add some more. I will be using a stud finder to double check that's where it is, and I may have to use some plasterboard tape. I don't know yet. So what I'm doing now, the day before we actually do any proper work, is I'm brushing over all of the chips and dints with a PVA solution. If you're wondering, it's 4 parts water to 1 part PVA. I had a little bit of PVA in there and I just topped it up with water. Just shook it and poured it in. So I'm just using the brush just to try and poke some of it in and go brush, brush, brush. So once this is dry, it should seal the porous areas, and then when I come to fill it, it's likely to stick on there and not fall off, and that has happened in the past before. So I'm going to go around just trying to look for all the chips and dints, and I totally forgot to say, we've already given this a white coat, about 2 coats, and the reason I paint first and then fill after is because by the time you've used a good quality matte paint, it can hide a lot of the blemishes you saw before, and it can hide very fine hairline cracks. And I've wasted hours or days sometimes trying to fill the smallest little thing, thinking it might show up. And when I started doing it in this order, I've been very surprised what I was able to get away with. So that's what I'm doing right now. So while I'm doing this, I just need Mr. TCD to point out with his nitpicky eye what he can see that he thinks I need to fill. That is a monster of an hole. Definitely be careful around your electrics. Before I continue the rest of the PVA, something I just want to quickly tell you. After we wallpaper stripped, I did notice the odd blemish where the plaster was raised. And so after painting, I've gone over any protruding bits and sanded it. So I'll have to give it all a miscoat anyway for things like that and any filler that I've added. Anyway, back to PVAing. I can't believe how much brighter it is in here. It's going to be even brighter once we turn dingy yellow lights into bright white ones. So it's been about 24 hours for the PVA solution to dry, which I've had a feel around. Yeah, it does. And I just want to talk you through a few tools that I've got here and materials that I'll be using for the first stages and then as I go along. So I had to nip out this morning to get some generic filler because I'll be using this, and I tend to buy the cheapest stuff for the really biggish holes. And when I say biggest, it's usually about 1 centimetre you can get away with. And obviously the thicker you apply it, the longer it's going to take to dry. And because it'll take longer to dry, I'll be using that first on the curtain rail holes and stuff like that than any of the bigger dints that I see. I'd also gone out and bought this one, which is the same brand but dries in 30 minutes. Well, I kind of regret getting this because when I picked it up I thought, it feels like it's empty. I open it up and there's definitely some in there, but I've got a cheaper alternative for finishing stuff instead of that. That was about £5. Very, very light and half the amount of this. Wow. And while that's drying, I'll be moving on to a powdered filler that I think is the best value. Just mix it up and go over the smaller dints and chips. And I've got a trick for that later as well. Now, by the time I get to the ceiling cracks, depending on how I feel of it, I may use paper tape and some, it's heavy, joint and skim, and water it down so it absorbs into the paper. I'm going to put that down. Wow. Or you could try something like this that I got for free from a Toolstation member of staff because they couldn't sell it because it was going out of date. which is Easy Filler Gyprock Finish. This is a lot more expensive, but I do want to try it at some point. Oh yeah, and tools, let me just show you. So filling knives. I generally do like using plastic ones, they just don't last as long. So I've got one quite chipped and they do wear out after a while. So if I hold up a filling knife, you might be able to see the gap just through there. So that's not going to be the best finish for larger areas. So for larger areas, yes, I'm going to be using metal ones. And if I do use tape for the cracks on the ceilings, I'll be using much larger ones for a very even spread so it's less visible. And for sanding it down, I'm just going to be using 120 grit sandpaper, which is good enough to take any bumps back, and the texture, if anything's left behind, it'll just get hidden with a roller anyway. Anything really, really fine is going to take you too long to sand stuff down. So let's start with this one, the big chunky one, because this is the cheapest and most hard wearing. So let the fun begin. So I've got a bit of a dollop and I'm just going to press in as much as I can. And because these are quite deep, I'm probably likely going to get some shrinkage. So I'll have to come back and do a fine finish and sand after. Something that I don't like to do is add so much where loads are protruding because it can be hard to remove it off.
What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you.
Last week when I took the wallpaper off, I didn't like the look of this corner where it definitely needs filling. So if it was really bad, I'd probably use corner paper tape there, but I don't think it needs it, so I'm just going to jam some of this in. I was just hitting record on the camera and Hans wants to open his toy drawer. You know that's not how to open it. I didn't design it like that. Go on then, show everyone in the world why they should make a dog toy drawer bed. There! It's getting a bit full though, mate. It's a bit too tight. Don't you smoking pipe? Problem is, Hans, you keep getting them out and you don't know how to put them back and put it away. That's it. Come on. No, I'm fine. However much you try, you always end up missing some. So I decided to try the fast drying stuff. God, it's so light that. So by the time I've sanded the rest of them, this should be dry and I can sand it. It's like I never messed up in the first place. And the best way to clean your tools is this. Been doing it for years and it's never failed me. So obviously I've got that bit that I've just filled that needs to dry. And during that time, I'll be sanding the rest of them. And Mr. TCD has also found some others that I've missed. Even though I did have job site lights aiming at the wall, sometimes a shadow, when it's looking away, is actually more beneficial. But anyway, it's a different lighting, we can see more things. So while they're drying, I'm gonna replace my sander with some new sandpaper. I'll be going all over the areas, removing any of the protruding filler. There will be the odd blemish that still needs filling, but Mr. TCD is going to follow behind me with a mist coat. And then once that's dried, hopefully we'll see even less things to fill and then do the final bits. Just in case you were wondering, I probably don't need to be really thorough with anything quite high up because I won't be able to see it at eye level unless your lights are aiming at the wall. I'm so sick of sanding. I've moved on to the orbital sander to speed things up. Obviously it's doing a bit more damage than I wanted to, but it's not nice to sand that stuff. So for the ceiling, I am going to wear my goggles and I'm going to start creating a V channel to remove any of the excess from this crack. And there's quite a bit. And it also looks like somebody's filled this before. So once I've done that, I'm going to try and pop some screws in, some drywall screws up to the end. Obviously I've got to be careful because there's probably a wire around here because there's a light. So I do have a stud finder. I'm just going to have to be careful. I can't think of any other way other than you going up there. Mr. TCD's gone up there just to double check. Hi! You're eating a cornetto up there. That's staying in. I can hear a cable. So can you just confirm 3 inches away from my finger is there definitely a joist there? Yeah? So if I put screws up, it's going to thin air. They're going that way. Do we need to put more noggins up there quickly? Paper tape then. Right, so I've got to really, I'm better off trying to find where they are with a stud finder. Right, I'm just gonna get my stud finder. Yeah, okay, I have found a stud. Okay, I found another one. Before I start messing about gouging these, I think the best thing to do is me bang a load of screws in, and then maybe you can check on it up there. Every time I put this down, I've got to calibrate it. Or do I? No, I don't. Right, I need my nail there. I don't know if I'm getting this. Have I hit it? Oh, it's just spinning around, it's no good anyway. The problem I'm finding is I went to put a screw in, this has happened to me twice, and I've hit the original nail that's there. I'm starting to think it needs some stud up there. Now that's hit something. Yeah, I'm gonna need a bum bag. Oh, yeah, this one's not even showing up. Yeah. Oh. I can go out on the outside of the ceiling rose. No. Oh, I just put an hole in the ceiling. An inch closer to the conservatory. I'm struggling now as well because the sofa's in the way. Please work. Oh, that hit something, I think. Yep. Finally. This piece of crap's going flat. Yeah, oh, just a minute, I've got to turn this off again. I don't trust it anymore. No, calibrating it again. That felt right. Right, we know that's not a stud. Oh, right. It reckons it's there. I don't know if I trust this, but you know, I've got holes to fill anyway. I'm trying it. No, that's not right, is it? That went. Oh, dropped it. So while Mr. TCD was up there, he was directing me of whether I was missing or not, and the stud finder wasn't perfect, and I kept having to calibrate it all the time. Very annoying. I've got no pockets either, so I had to find anywhere to put some screws. But by the time I got to the end one, can you see here as well? There's a hairline crack running this way. So I know that the joist is here as well. So now I'm following this crack and putting a screw either side to try and nip it in the bud. So yeah, I've got a lot like this throughout the house, but one room at a time. I'm also making sure the screws are buried behind the plaster so I can then come and fill over the top of it and they'll never be seen. Once I put all the screws in I thought it needed, I scored V-shapes in the cracks with the corner of a filling knife, sealed again with a PVA solution and waited for it to dry before filling with joint and skim, pretty much like before. So it's been 24 hours since this skim has dried and I can see some shrinkage, so I'm going to have to sand that over and fill it again. And that area I decided not to bother with taping because it wasn't as bad as this. So instead of filling it, what I've done is cut some noggin supports and I've placed them in situ up there in the loft. And in a minute, I'm going to screw those in between the joists. And I didn't fill this crack in yesterday because by the time I've left it to dry, put the supports in up there and then screwed these into the new supports, I could get a crack again and have to refill it. I just thought this way would be so much easier than faffing about with paper tape. And I think it'd be a good experiment to compare the two where I didn't bother with more supports up there and I did with this and no tape is used. We'll see. I just don't want to go above and beyond if I don't have to because it's a lot of time. Let's go up. Got my combi drill and impact driver. I think this is going to be the best angle for you, unfortunately. I just need to crack on because I don't want to put my foot through the ceiling. I will grab the camera properly shortly. So what I'm going to have to do is screw one on an angle initially, and then I can come from the other side and then put a screw there. I'm making sure this overlaps evenly as much as I can on those joins. That way I've got a surface area to mount. Look at that. What can you see? Look at that, right? Fingers can go under there. That is not secure enough to this. There's definitely not enough screws in here in general. Could do with putting a load in. Now I'm going to start screwing those plasterboards to the new supports that I've just added. Not all the joist widths were exactly the same, so I brought some scraps up here just so I can mark and cut them on the miter saw. I don't want bits of plaster chippings going in my eyes, very irritating. I've already PVA'd this and all. That's another job I've got to do. So this is the bit I know is sagging, and I can probably put double the amount of my fingers between the joist and the plasterboard. So I'm going to bang a few screws in here. Oh, I don't know if that's fresh air or what. I didn't get anything. It won't because it's not long enough. So I found some longer drywall screws, and it shouldn't poke through the joist by the time I've gone through. I hit some at then. What I'm going to do, I've got the odd thing to put PVA glue on. I'm going to do that, go for some tea, and hopefully it's drying time because the rest is dry. I've got loads to fill, leave it overnight, sand it, and I've got that to sand tonight and fill again. I'm basically doing this all night. Should I have got a plasterer in? I don't think so. They still would have had to do some stuff like this. We're just going for it. Come on, look what I just found in the light as I looked at the ceiling. Is that either a moth or a red admiral? Anyway, this is how it's looking so far. I think this is so much better. Now, I still need to give it another coat or two because it's had 2 coats, I think, but I've been filling and sanding in between the cracks here, there, and there's a few different places. And so that's why they are looking a little bit darker, because they need more coats. But for the finish filler, I actually was lazy and went for this. Although I did moan about this initially, I was quite happy with this. Didn't have to mix it up. It was very simple to use. It's not quite a 30-minute drying time, I found, even with a very fine coat. But something I didn't show you, and I quickly want to say, now something my father-in-law taught me a few years ago is for the very fine hairline cracks, not for the deep screw holes and stuff, but if you're just doing finishing details, just use this. But instead of mixing a really thick paste like it says, add more water. And so when you fill it, it'll be easier to sand off, and it actually dries a lot quicker if you're just doing very shallow cracks and stuff. And I love that method. Actually, it's probably easier to do that than use this, but I didn't have to mix this up. And while filling the cracks, something I was curious about was, would you have just gone with the paper tape or gone up and added more supports? Because I know when I showed using this a couple of months ago, actually, sorry, it was last year, this actually takes a long time, because when you do cover it up, you've got to feather it about 2 or 3 times, so it could take days to get a best finish. And you can actually get bubbling. I just didn't want to mess about. I didn't have the time. That's why I went for the studs there. So this area here I just want to quickly talk about. So during the stage of me creating a V-groove in a lot of the cracked areas and removing any flaky plaster, I took quite a bit off here off camera. So I ended up just filling that with skim, and the reason it's looking like that right now is it still hasn't dried. It's been about, I think it's on the second day. I think it needs a few more days to dry, and then I'll go over and just try and get it as best I can. So if you look in this corner of the room, I'm almost there for dot and dab on this wall, but I've realised this is where the TV is going to go, and I really need a socket put there. I don't want anything trailing down here, so we can have a bit of a floating TV. So that's what I'm going to be sorting next week. I'm going to be fitting a back box somewhere, don't know where yet, and we're going to spare it off one of the sockets around there. And while I've got wire strippers out, I may as well take the time to replace all of the wall lights and find a pendant light or something for here. And of course the ones in here, and it's very dark, so we need to look for something. I've never fitted a new light before, but I'm quite excited because I'm just going to add it to this circuit here, which the switch is over there. But that does mean I need to go out and do some light shopping because I can't figure out the quality online. I don't want to order something, have it arrive and it just looks a bit meh. So anyway, if you do anything differently in any of this or any guidance, then please let me know, and hopefully I'll catch you next week and in the comments. Thanks for watching. Bye.